I'll go ahead and get started, and hopefully, if more people join in, it won't be too hectic for them to catch up. Uh, but thank you all for joining us today. Today we're holding uh, the TennCare eligibility and immigration status webinar here with TJC, and we're excited to share this information with you all, and hopefully, you all will find it as helpful as we find it. So today I'm presenting. My name is Luke McCundon. I am one of the client advocates specifically under the Insure Our Kids grant that was given to us by the Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services. And I, in my role, help help parents, children, and those who are pregnant enroll in TennCare and CoverKids to get health care for their needs. So today's agenda, uh, we will be going over essentially, first of all, over what Tennessee Justice Center is, then TennCare and Cover Kids, what those programs are, and everything that those programs entail. And then after that, we go more into specifics about uh, the different immigration statuses that you might see people have and how that interacts with the TennCare system and all the different particular nooks and crannies that come with that uh, in determining TennCare eligibility. We'll also go into other programs such as TennCare Emergency Medical Services and Marketplace Health Insurance, and then we'll also uh, give you a better idea of like how to like file an application or even appeal a denial or a termination if you receive that. So Tennessee Justice Center, we are a law firm and advocacy-based nonprofit, and our work is based on health advocacy and nutrition advocacy. And typically, our work is based upon individual client representation. Like I said, based on healthcare and nutrition programs here in Tennessee. Um, and that's usually in the form of casework, but it also manifests itself in class action litigation when necessary to correct systemic issues. And just overall, what we try to do is just advocate for legislative and administrative changes on the state and federal level uh, to help Tennesseans get access to these programs that they deserve to have access to. So one such program that we try to help people get enrolled in is TennCare. Now, TennCare is Tennessee's Medicaid program, and TennCare is essentially, like I said, being Medicaid is a free public health program, and to get TennCare, your ability to get it is determined by your eligibility group, and uh, to determine your eligibility, for one thing, you have to have is financial eligibility. And so there's an income test, and then uh, there's also, in some cases, going to be a resource test or an expenses test. And then also for some other categories, even if you don't meet the standards for income eligibility, there are certain medical needs that would also be covered by TennCare. Overall, though, the typical groups that TennCare covers are children who are under 21 years old, especially children uh, who are uh, who are newborn through their 19th birthday, and then also women who are pregnant, and they're allowed to keep their coverage from up until their birth, and then 1 year postpartum, and then the parents and caretakers for minor children, they're allowed to get coverage. And so like that includes caretakers, including not just uh, biological parents, but also say like grandparents or any other custodial caretaker, they're able to get coverage. Uh, Additionally, certain individuals with breast or cervical cancer are allowed to get coverage. And then if if you're enrolled in SSI, Supplemental Security Income, if you're enrolled in that program, you're automatically enrolled in TennCare and are not subject to the other standards of eligibility or having to renew your coverage. And also you're able to, um, if you meet any of these requirements, you're able to get any long-term services that TennCare can pay for. Now, I mentioned some of the financial requirements that you have to meet. Additionally, there are other non-financial requirements you have to meet, and those include A, being a Tennessee resident, uh, B, having a social security number, and C, and what we'll expand upon later in the presentation is you must have qualifying immigration status or be a U.S. citizen. Now, what does TennCare cover typically? It really depends. For the most part, like it will cover your doctor's visits. It'll, it'll cover like dentist visits, or it will even cover certain prescriptions. Uh, but there are, of course, limitations, and so we recommend that to figure out what exactly TennCare can and cannot cover, you go to TennCare's website through the link below, and this presentation will be shared after we're done, so you'll be able to directly click the link uh, once you have that in your possession. Uh, but yeah, since TennCare is Medicaid, it's essentially totally paid for, and outside prescriptions, any and all copays would be taken care of for enrollees. Now, besides TennCare, there's also CoverKids, and CoverKids is Tennessee's child health insurance program that is meant to uh, help children and certain other individuals uh, who cannot enroll in TennCare to enroll in a public health program at uh, at a very low cost, if not totally free of charge for most instances. So in order to be eligible for CoverKids, you must either be a child or you must be a pregnant woman with a household income below 250% of the federal poverty line for your household size. There's no resource test, so that makes things a little bit simpler. And also, while pregnant women under TennCare are able to keep their coverage postpartum for 1 full year, for CoverKids, that postpartum period is only for 60 days. So that's another difference that you want to know between TennCare and CoverKids. Um, Now, like TennCare, the core criteria of non-financial eligibility is that you have to be Tennessee resident, uh, and then you have to have qualifying immigration status and be a citizen uh, if you are a child. And then if you're pregnant, it gets a little bit more complicated, and I will expand upon that in just a second. Uh, but CoverKids is very similar to TennCare, where it covers a wide range of services like your doctor visits and dentist visits. Um, but there are certain things it won't cover, and there are going to be copays that you will have to make, unlike TennCare. So just to get a better idea of what all will be included within that, we recommend, like with TennCare, to go to TennCare's website to see exactly what CoverKids does and does not cover. So I talked about some like non-financial eligibility requirements that you need to fulfill to get TennCare or CoverKids. And one of those requirements is qualifying immigration status or qualifying citizen status. So as you can see here, to get TennCare, you must be a U.S. citizen, and that includes those born in the United States and naturalized citizens, or a U.S. national. So that means someone who's born in American Samoa, Swains Islands, or other U.S. minor outlying islands. Or you must be a qualified non-citizen. So qualified non-citizen is something that I will expand upon in just a second. But basically, if you have a qualified non-citizen status, you're able to enroll in TennCare. Now, for CoverKids, it's very similar to TennCare in that for the most part, you have to be a U.S. citizen or U.S. national or qualified non-citizen. And for children, that is the case. If you don't meet those requirements, you're not eligible for coverage. But for pregnant women, um, the need to be a qualified non-citizen does not extend to them. So if you are pregnant and you need to get health insurance, even if you did not have um, qualified immigration status or a qualified non-citizen status, that would not be necessary for you to get CoverKids, because the way that CoverKids works is that because the unborn child that you're pregnant with is presumed to be a U.S. citizen upon their birth, they're the ones essentially getting covered during that period. So your immigration status is irrelevant in that instance. Now, what is a qualified non-citizen? And it's important to note that you might hear certain terms get thrown around that are similar but are different. For example, and I'll expand upon this near the end. There's also lawfully present non-citizens, um, or also there's also uh, non-immigrants uh, who these are other categories that are going to be different and that are not going to be eligible for TennCare or CoverKids. So qualified non-citizens uh, are going to be like a certain group of immigrants that you'll see very frequently. So this might include non-citizens lawfully admitted for permanent residence or a lawful permanent resident, and you might see that uh, being referred to more colloquially as someone who has a green card. Uh, you might also see that as being someone who's a refugee or an asylee. So someone who was granted entry into the country as a refugee, or someone who once they're in the country was given asylum. You might also see a non-citizen who's paroled into the United States for a period of at least 1 year. And parole can be kind of broad. You might see it referred to as humanitarian parole, and typically it's reserved for people whose uh, being allowed entry into the United States is in the vested public interest of the United States. And uh, there are special programs for parole that you might see pop up every now and then. Like, for example, when conflict in Ukraine began in early 2023, uh, United States opened up a special Ukrainian humanitarian parole program that uh, for any Ukrainian entrant who entered before October of 2023, they were eligible for TennCare through parole, regardless of how long their parole status was allowed. Um, and you see certain entrants into the United States who've been granted parole, uh, basically as they've been granted an ICE hearing after they entered into the country, and they're given parole after that. Uh, and their eligibility is going to be dependent upon the length of that parole. And so that's just something to know. And then there are other existing programs similar to the Ukrainian program for countries such as Venezuela and Nicaragua, uh, but they are also subject to needing a period of at least 1 year. Now, there's also non-citizens whose deportation is withheld um, from immigration services, and also battered immigrants and children who meet certain conditions uh, of, uh, of suffering domestic violence. You'll also see Cuban and Haitian entrants uh, who are allowed to, who are deemed as qualified non-citizens. There's also non-citizens who are granted conditional entry. Um, then there are also non-citizens who are victims of a severe form of trafficking or who've been granted non-immigrant status and have a pending application that sets forth a prima facie case for such non-immigrant status. And then there's also, and this is exceedingly rare, but there are also non-citizens who lawfully reside in the United States in accordance with the compacts of free association between the government of the United States and also the governments of the Federated States of Micronesia, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and the Republic of Palau. Um, And like I said, there are other immigration statuses that are not deemed to be qualified non-citizen status. So like if you are given information about someone's status and you aren't sure if it fits into this, we recommend that you check TennCare's specific policy about qualified non-citizens just to make sure it lines up with one of these categories. Because if not, they cannot be deemed as a qualified non-citizen and be eligible for TennCare. Now, one thing to note is that even though qualified non-citizens are eligible for TennCare, uh, the federal government has put in place since 1996 a a bar on receiving federal benefits for certain categories of qualified non-citizens. So, as you can see, if you are if you are a lawful permanent resident, uh, so if you have a green card, or if you've been paroled into the United States, or if you're an abused spouse, or if you're a victim of human trafficking, or were a conditional immigrant who was granted status before 1980, in that instance, you have a 5-year bar in which you are not allowed to receive uh, TennCare or CoverKids or any other federal benefits for the first 5 years you've been granted entry under that status. Now, it is important to note that, like I said earlier, for CoverKids, where it doesn't matter what your immigration status is, if you're pregnant, the same thing would apply here. So even if you're pregnant, the 5-year bar on federal benefits wouldn't apply to you. You'd be able to get coverage because it is assumed to be for your child and not you. Um, but for every other instance of TennCare and CoverKids, uh, for the first 5 years that you have your immigration status, you will not be able to get uh, uh, that health insurance through TennCare and CoverKids. Now there are going to be options for you, and I'll expand upon that near the end as well when I talk about uh, the federally facilitated marketplace. Uh, but TennCare and CoverKids will not be one of those options. Now that being said, if you have asylum or you're a refugee or an immigrant from Cuba or Haiti, um, or your deportation is withheld, uh, or you're an Iraqi or Afghan special immigrant, or a member of a federally recognized Indian tribe, uh, or also you were any of those statuses, and after receiving those status, you adjusted your immigration status to become a lawful permanent resident. In that instance, you do not have to wait 5 years. You're able to receive your benefits as soon as you have that status. And I do see there's a question, and I'll get to that once I finish. So just a reminder, if you have any questions, make sure to ask them, and I'll get to them all at the very end. But yeah, as you can see, there are certain categories where you have to wait 5 years, but then there's other ones where you don't. But there is also one other thing to know is that uh, there are also certain categories of non-citizens where once enrolled in a TennCare CoverKids program, they only remain eligible for that coverage during the first 7 years that they are granted entry under that status. And basically, as you can see, it's the same group of of non-citizens who did not have to wait 5 years to get coverage. So it's refugees, asylees, uh, Asian immigrants, Cuban and Haitian entrants, and then Afghan and Iraqi special immigrants, as well as their spouses and children. Um, as soon as they enter the country, they're allowed to receive benefits. They're allowed to receive TennCare and CoverKids for the first 7 years that they're in the country. But after that point, they are no longer allowed to receive coverage. The only way that they can circumvent that is by adjusting their immigration status. And so if they adjust their immigration status to become lawful permanent residents, then in that instance, they would be able to keep their coverage. And like I said beforehand, if you adjusted your status from any of the above statuses to lawful permanent resident, to become a lawful permanent resident, in that instance, you wouldn't actually have to wait 5 years either. So you wouldn't be subject to a 5-year bar. Then you also wouldn't be subject to 7-year eligibility limit. Now, when you're dealing with people who might have qualified non-citizen status, you might see a plethora of different immigration documents. So I just want to go over some of them that you might see, and then how to interpret them in terms of TennCare eligibility. So as you can see here, here's a lawful permanent resident card, and this is what you might see different versions of it, but this is what the current version currently looks like. And as you can see, it says a category on the front that says RE8, and there are different category codes, but RE8 in this instance stands for refugee. So in this instance, you can see because they have permanent resident status, they are eligible for TennCare or CoverKids because they're qualified non-citizen. Uh, Now, they would normally have to wait for a 5-year bar because they have LPR status, but because they were previously refugees, they're not subject to that 5-year bar, and they're able to get coverage immediately. Now, something else you might see many times is an I-94 form, and basically that's like an arrival and departure record that someone can get whenever they come into the country. And so in this instance, as you can see, the person's I-94 is stamped showing that they have parole status. And so whether or not they can get TennCare is entirely dependent on the length that they were granted parole. So if they were granted parole for a period of less than 1 year, then they're not eligible to receive TennCare. And then if they were granted if they were granted parole for a period of more than 2 years or more than 1 year, they are able to get coverage. But in that instance, they are subject to a 5-year bar. So that's something that you'll need to keep in mind if you see I-94 form with a parolee stamp. Another document that you might see is a I-571 form, which is a refugee travel document. As you can guess from the name, it's for refugees, and because someone is a refugee, that means that they're able to get TennCare and CoverKids. However, and because they're able to get TennCare and CoverKids as refugees, they're not subject to 5-year bar. However, they are subject to 7-year eligibility window, so they will need to adjust their status to a lawful permanent resident if they wish to keep their coverage beyond that point. Something that you might also see is an employment authorization card. And an employment authorization card in of itself is not an immigration document just because it doesn't really specify what their immigration status is. Like someone can be someone who is a lawful permanent resident can have an employment authorization card. Someone who doesn't have any documented status but has applied for asylum and has been waiting more than 150 days for said asylum application to get processed is able to get employment authorization. And then someone who is not an immigrant at all, is a non-immigrant who perhaps has a work visa like an H2A or H2B visa. In that instance, they would also be able to get an employment authorization card. So just like you would with an LPR card, you want to look at the category that's listed. So in this instance, the category that was listed was someone who has deferred action on childhood arrival or DACA. And so someone who has DACA is not eligible for TennCare or CoverKids. They are not qualified non-citizens, so they cannot get coverage. Now, I will tell you in just a little bit what is available to them, just because very recently some more options have become available for DACA recipients to enroll in more cost-effective healthcare plans. So, like I said, I'll touch on that in just a bit. Now, something else you might see is on the I-94 that I mentioned is a temporary stamp. That's an I-551 stamp. And so what that means is an I-551 stamp signifies that someone has lawful permanent resident status. And typically, they'll have this stamp before they actually receive their card, like the physical green card. And you'll see the stamp sometimes on I-94. You might see it on their original foreign passport. Uh, but basically, if they have the I-551 stamp, that means that they have LPR status. And that, of course, means that they can get TennCare or CoverKids. But whether or not they're subject to 5-year bar will be dependent upon whether or not uh, they entered into the country of LPR status or any other status uh, that is subject to the 5-year bar, or if they entered into the country as a refugee or asylee or any other category that's not subject to a 5-year bar on federal benefits. Um, Once again, as you can see, this is another I-94 form. And this was someone who's been granted asylum. And uh, if you're granted asylum, you are eligible for TennCare and CoverKids, and you are not subject to a 5-year bar on federal benefits. But I mentioned before, just like refugee status and several other statuses, you're only able to receive federal benefits for 7 years before you're going to have to adjust your status to something else, to lawful permanent residence. Now, if you're not able to get TennCare or CoverKids, and especially if you're someone who doesn't have any immigration status, any documented immigration status, you can still access what's called TennCare Emergency Medical Services. Sometimes this might be referred to more casually as emergency Medicaid. Now, this is just meant for, like I said, uh, certain Tennessee residents who can't get access to TennCare due to their immigration status. Now, this TennCare services these services are only available for certain instances, specifically for services that are needed to save your life, prevent serious dysfunction of a critical organ, or prevent serious deterioration of a body function. Now, normally in these instances, we recommend that the hospital helps you with the application. But if they're not available to do that, you are able to access the application to do so on your own. Now, to file that application along with any other application with TennCare or CoverKids, you can do so through a number of different means. The most common way that we recommend that people do that, and that we typically at Tennessee Justice Center help people apply for TennCare with, is through TennCare's online portal, which is TennCare Connect. And they have both a website, tenncareconnect.tn.gov, and also a mobile app. Now, to sign up for that, you'll need an email. And after you send in an application, if it's not done so automatically, you'll be asked to link your your case information to the account you created. And you can do so either through the head of household's social security number, TennCare person ID, or the application number that you just filed. Now, I will say, uh, while you can use an application number, it is going to be very unlikely that immediately upon submitting an application that you'll be able to use that application number, because typically TennCare will be processing the application and won't allow you to link a case using it unless it's been fully processed and they've sent out a decision for it. You can also use your TennCare person ID. However, if you just applied, probably don't know what it is. And the only way that you're probably going to be able to find that out is if TennCare sends you a letter. So if you see in the mail, it would say your name, and then in parentheses, it would say TennCare person ID next to it. So you can use that to link up an account. But of course, like I said, it's dependent upon you receiving mail from TennCare. Uh, and then you're also able to use the social security number to link up the case. Now, there are going to be instances where you don't have a social security number. It might be that you're a refugee or an asylee, or uh, maybe you're working with someone who is pregnant and doesn't have any qualified immigration status. In that instance, it gets a little more trickier. You'll probably have to call TennCare directly to get provided their person ID, uh, and that will be the way that you can link up their case. So, uh, like I said, you can do that online through TennCare's website or their mobile app. or you can do it on your phone by calling TennCare Connect at 855-259-0701 and speaking to a TennCare representative who will essentially, instead of filing it online yourself, they will be the ones doing it for you, and you will just give them your answers for the questions that you need to answer to determine eligibility. Additionally, you can also find a paper application through TennCare's website, and you can fill this out manually, write your answers in, and then you can mail the application to TennCare's PO box, where you can see the address down below. Now, if you've applied and you've been denied or terminated, or even if you've applied and after applying within 45 days have not received a decision, you are able to appeal TennCare to ask them to reconsider what they've done. Um, Now you're able to do that through TennCare Connect's portal by going to your TennCare Connect account, and there will be a tab on the account that says My Appeals, where you can then file a new appeal. And once you do that, it'll give you a list of different options that you can choose from as a reason for your appeal. You're also able to do so over the phone by calling the same number that you would call to file an application. And if you do that, uh, they'll file an appeal just as you would through TennCare Connect. But if you or a client requires like language services, they will be able to provide that for you. Moreover, there is also a paper appeal application, just like there is with the TennCare application. And you can find that again through TennCare's website. And if you need to mail that, you can do so through TennCare Connect through their PO box. Now, let's say TennCare or CoverKids is not an option that's available to you for several different reasons. It could be because of income. Typically, if you are a child, uh, you have to be uh, at, if you are a newborn to 1 year old, you have to be at 195% of the federal poverty line at your household size. If you're 1 through 6 years old, you need to be at 142% of the federal poverty line. And then uh, through age 19, you need to be at 133% of the federal poverty line. And then if you're pregnant, or if you're qualifying for CoverKids as a child, you need to be at 250% of the federal poverty line. And then if you are a caretaker relative and want to qualify for TennCare, you need to be at 100% of the federal poverty line. Uh, if you exceed any of those amounts, you can qualify for Marketplace, which is the federally facilitated marketplace that was created through the Affordable Care Act. And you do this through healthcare.gov. And so healthcare.gov offers a wide selection of different marketplace health plans and just helps consumers just understand what options are available to them. And unlike TennCare and CoverKids, which have rolling admissions uh, and rolling registration, the registration period for Marketplace, the open enrollment period that is November 1st through January 15th. And to enroll at any other time outside that window, you have to have um, a special enrollment window that requires certain life events such as uh, moving or losing previous coverage or any other significant life changes. I guess, and like I said below, you can also like get married or have a baby or have like a significant change in income. Now, another thing to note is that uh, of the categories, like of when it comes to immigration status, there are certain differences between Marketplace and TennCare and CoverKids that you'll want to keep in mind. For example, lawfully present immigrants are also going to be eligible for a Marketplace plan. And so uh, this will include like people who have an immigrant visa or have temporary protected status or special immigrant juveniles. Also, someone who is a temporary legal resident, so who's someone who is a non-immigrant temporary resident, such as someone with a student visa, an H-2A or H-2B work visa, or even like a tourist visa, they would be eligible to enroll in a marketplace plan. And then another very important thing to know is that um, a very important thing to note um, is that qualified non-citizens who are not eligible to enroll in TennCare or CoverKids because they're within their 5-year window of eligibility, or also they've exceeded their 7-year uh, they exceed the 7-year window where they're allowed to get coverage. During that time, they're actually able to enroll in a marketplace plan. So if you are, say, a lawful permanent resident and you're subject to a 5-year bar, you're not able to get coverage, during that 5-year window, you're able to enroll in a marketplace plan. And then as of May 3rd, the Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services put out a final ruling officially expanding marketplace insurance eligibility to those who have DACA. So if you have DACA, you are now able to enroll through the federally facilitated marketplace. And also something that is to note for qualified non-citizens who are within their 5-year bar, uh, normally to apply for marketplace and get the cost saving reductions or the premium tax credits that make it a much more affordable plan, you need to be between 100 and 400% of the federal poverty level. That being said, for qualified non-citizens, uh, you do not need to be at 100% or 400%. You can be at any income level. You can be, even if you have no income whatsoever, you qualify for the tax credits and cost saving reductions that come with a marketplace plan. Now, even if all those are not options for you, say if you are someone who does not have documented immigration status, or if you need more particular services, there are going to be other options available to you. Now, the only thing to keep in mind is that uh, it will be dependent upon your immigration status, and we will be delving into that a little bit more at the end of this month on June 27th, when we have another webinar where we'll discuss several different topics such as refugee medical assistance, family planning services, hospital financial assistance, as well as community health access and navigation in Tennessee, or CHAMT. But this has basically been just a big overview on TennCare and CoverKids, as well as Marketplace, and how certain qualified non-citizens can fit into that. So this will be just touching on where TennCare and CoverKids doesn't exactly fit into that plan. So that's really all that we have today for this presentation, and just everything that has to do with TennCare and CoverKids and qualified non-citizen status. So I'll go ahead and start looking at questions in Q&A, and if you have any other additional questions, go ahead and ask them and I'll try to answer. Yeah, so like I said, someone was asking about Ukrainian parolees. And so, like I said earlier, uh, United States created they created a Ukrainian humanitarian parolee program where those who came in 2022 and up until October 1st of 2023 were eligible for TennCare and CoverKids, did not have to wait any period of time before getting coverage. They were immediately eligible. Now, the one thing to know is that if someone has come since October 1st, they actually will be subject to a 5-year bar on federal benefits, because they will just be considered in the same category as other parolees. But anytime before then, they would be able to get coverage immediately. right? I'm not seeing any other answers. Any other questions? Let me look at the chats. Um, yes, so Elizabeth asked um, about whether or not refugees are eligible to stay on TennCare for up to 70 years. Yes. So if you receive refugee status for the first 7 years after you've been given that status, you are eligible to enroll in TennCare or CoverKids. And then once those 7 years end, unless you've adjusted your status to a lawful permanent resident, at that point you will not be able to keep your coverage. Uh, so at that point, like unless you adjust, you would have to either enroll in an employer plan or a private plan through Marketplace. See. So asking about like if child has F1 status due to their parent being in the US for academic learning, teaching, or for those reasons. So because that person would fall into the category of being uh, a non-immigrant temporary resident, and their child's coming along under the same category of coverage, under the same category of immigration status, they would not be eligible for TennCare or Cover Kids because they would not be qualified non-citizens, but they would be eligible to enroll in a marketplace plan. See, yeah, Sharon, just to qualify your question, um, yeah, so only expecting immigrants um, would be eligible for Cover Kids. So if you're a caretaker relatives in general are not able to get Cover Kids, it's only children and then expecting parents. Um, so if you're not expecting as a caretaker relative, you can't get Cover Kids. Uh, and then if you are a child, you have to be a qualified non-citizen to get Cover Kids. And then and then Capita, very good point. I think I forgot to note that. You're correct. Yes, the deadline for Ukrainian parolees has been extended actually. So it'll be as of October 1st of 2024. If they come after that point, they won't be able to keep their coverage. Let's see. Teacher asked, how would you advise an undocumented person if they are afraid to apply for benefits because they think Medicaid will turn them over to ICE? Um, they also think that receiving benefits will hurt their case for LPR or citizenship. So that is a concern that I definitely see a lot with many of our immigrant clients and just talking to other immigrant advocacy organizations. That's something that many of the people that they work with talk about. So there's this idea of a public charge that people think that if they apply for these programs that their immigration status will be relayed to ICE and other immigration services. Uh, However, for TennCare and or more specifically for Cover Kids, I wouldn't say that's a concern that you have to a concern that I think holds too much credence. Obviously, like to get TennCare, you have to have a certain immigration status. So if someone is not a qualified non-citizen, they're just not able to get TennCare anyways. So like you need to report the accurate immigration status for TennCare, and you wouldn't apply for it unless you knew you had that to begin with. Um, but for Cover Kids, if someone is applying and they are an uh, undocumented immigrant, what you're able to do through TennCare Connect is you will have to say that you're not a U.S. citizen. But then when it asks you to specify what your immigration status is, you're able to say that you prefer not to say what your immigration status is. And so in that instance, you don't have to say that you have qualified immigration status. but you don't have to say you don't have it either. So you're just able to basically leave it as it is and move on, and it doesn't have any effect on your application, and you're able to get coverage. Let's see. Then Harriet asked if asylum was denied, the immigrant is allowed to remain in the U.S. Because they made a request on the application. Then the 5-year waiting period is waiting. So if I believe what you're asking is like if someone was denied asylum, uh, but they were still allowed to stay like say like under parole status. Um, I think in that instance they wouldn't be a qualified non-citizen. So I think in that scenario they wouldn't be eligible for TennCare or CoverKids regardless. So they would have to enroll in either a marketplace plan or um, a private insurance plan outside of the marketplace. Uh, Mazine asked, uh, yes. So student visa women, normally they would only be eligible for a marketplace plan if they're just trying to get insurance for themselves. But if they become pregnant, they are able to get CoverKids because uh, it's assumed that the child is going to be born in the United States as a U.S. citizen. So the child is essentially the one being covered. Um, let's see. And then, yeah, I think Harry, I think just to reiterate, I think if someone doesn't have asylum, but they're allowed to stay in the country just like as a parolee. Um, it would depend like on like the length of time that that their parole was granted. Um, just first determine if they can even get TennCare or CoverKids. Um, and then at that point, um, because they're parolee, they would still fall within the 5-year window, the 5-year bar where they can't get TennCare or CoverKids. So basically, like you're only able to circumvent the 5-year bar if you have asylum uh, or refugee or like work refugee status or like a Cuban and Haitian entrant. If you don't have those statuses, you're not able to get past the 5-year bar. And then Elizabeth also, I think a recording of this will be shared with you. I think it'll be emailed out to you. I think once we're done, I think that will be heading your way shortly after that. Then Dallas asks, if someone is pregnant, same rules apply for asylum refugees and I-94 status. Um, yeah, so like I think just kind of reiterate, if you have CoverKids and you're pregnant, I mean, if you're pregnant, you can get CoverKids, regardless of immigration status. Um, and then like if you have asylum or refugee status, um, and you're pregnant, you qualify for TennCare already. So you can just get TennCare pregnancy coverage, which would be much more preferable since instead of only lasting 2 months postpartum, it would be 1 year postpartum. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any more questions. Um, but thank you for joining us today. I'm really appreciative of everyone who showed up to seek out this information, and I hope it very much proves helpful. Uh, whether or not you need it for yourself or if you need it to uh, help clients where this will be relevant to them. Uh, I think that this is information that definitely needs to be shared out in Tennessee and Nashville, especially with our immigrant communities. And like I said, this presentation and the recording as well will be shared with you eventually. It'll be sent to your email. And again, thank you. And I'm glad to have been of help in any way. And hope you all have a very good rest of your day. Thank you for coming.